proposal that I know that Flatbush have a lot of snow out there. They've been working a lot. Maybe we could touch on the things that involve Jason that he would want to speak for.
I think that we're all set. I've got your,
You need
I've got the quote.
if you don't need me for the change discussion, then yeah, I'm all set.
Does anybody think they use Jason for any of that?
I won't be able to answer very many questions about the change on the grader, but I don't think we really have it.
Do you have questions about the change in the grader?
Not really. Can we call you if needed? We're good.
All right.
How did you know who would hit the button?
I think
Have a good night.
Okay. Ready?
All right.
So, reverse order of the seats here.
Yeah.
Let's see, just a couple things to report on. One, we have appointed a co-chair, Jeff Bickford, to the committee. Just kind of trying to break down the hierarchy of authority in the committee, so spread it out a little bit. So we are now co-chairs. Number two, we have the 2 Human Rights Commissions workshops coming up. Implicit bias workshop on Thursday, February 10th at 5:30 p.m. and the bystander intervention on Saturday, February 12th at 10 a.m. They're both by Zoom now, so just waiting from, and both will be facilitated by Amanda Garces, who's the Director of Policy, Education, and Outreach at the Human Rights Commission. So once we get the registration links, we'll be putting those out and publicizing and letting everybody know. And of course, we invite all select board members to attend, and we're reaching out to the trustees and other organizations through town, hoping to just get a bunch of community leaders and participants at these Zoom meetings, these Zoom workshops. And then the third piece is we had pretty good lengthy discussion about kind of the breadth of work that this committee does and what we have done this past year and what we hope to do for the community. And we decided to change our name to the Racial Justice and Social Equity Committee. Just we think that it will kind of help center all marginalized voices in our community, considering other neighboring towns and groups like DEI committees, JEDI committees, things that kind of have more inclusive kind of scope of work and advocacy. So that's, yeah, we decided to change our name to that. So just one more letter in the acronym here, RJSE. And that's about it I have for the reporting. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Welcome board, yeah. Thank you.
How are people signing up for the sessions?
So there will be a registration link with the Zoom. So once we get that, we will send it up, put it on Front Porch Forum, and you can send it through emails. And I believe once you click on that, you can register, and it's free to the public.
So it's this Thursday though?
No, February.
Okay, the implicit bias is when?
Saturday, February 12th.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. Implicit bias, Thursday, February 10th.
I gotcha, so it's the 10th and the 12th.
Yeah, 10th and the 12th of February. I was like, oh, this week.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. So still a bit away.
Quick question, is what was her name, Amanda Garces, is she setting up the registration and the Zoom link?
She is, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it'll be through the Human Rights Commission. And she helped Oregon facilitate the last implicit bias one that we had.
Okay.
So she was there. She might have another helper also, but I'm not quite sure. So for now, I think it's just Amanda.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they need any assistance with it, we can help.
I'll definitely let her know.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, I have another question. So you talked about there was a good discussion about the work you do and how you do it, and it led to the name revision. But can you talk a little bit about what that work is that you're referring to?
So we're thinking like in the past year, we've you know, getting the Take Back Vermont photograph removed from the municipal foyer, and you know, hanging the pride flags for Vermont Pride Week. Like I don't think that we're solely working on racial justice issues. I think that there has been ways that our work has kind of segued into other social equity concerns and issues for our town. So just kind of that, not like boxing us into just racial justice, but allowing us to kind of be like a diversity, equity, inclusion, or inclusivity, you know, group in that way.
Okay, has it changed so that's looking back and renaming, like what, that's your identity, right? You're redefining your identity. But is that changing like the plans for the year in any way?
So we will probably have a conversation about that. We're talking about just kind of reassessing kind of the core values of the group and kind of what our intentions are. As far as like budget stuff goes, I don't think it'll change anything there per se. But I mean, no, I don't think.
It could affect, you know, what kinds of programs and education we try to add going forward. You know, I feel like our schedule of events that we want to do for the upcoming fiscal year is kind of there. Doesn't mean we can't do other stuff. But the idea is to sort of look at the fact that we're already thinking about, talking about, acting on when possible broader issues than that. And so, you know, as we think about our planning going forward, how else can we educate about, advocate for, reach out to other marginalized communities within our area?
Okay, I asked because you both know this. You already both know this, but I'm just gonna share it. I asked because I was doing some of my own work personally and watched some programs that were a few decades old at this point, and very specifically racial topics are being talked about right now using the same language that was used 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that is, to me, like an indication that not enough has changed. And I just think about it in terms of like the other areas you're talking about, the other equities you're talking about in whatever the social realm is now. And I feel like there is significant differences in the language we use today. There's a cadence out there and it's continually being pushed and it's growing. Like we don't talk about gay rights the same way we talked about them 20 years ago. We don't talk about them the same way we talked about them 10 years ago for that matter. But we talk about racial inequities and injustices in all the same ways. And that really concerns me personally, that concerns me. And I just mention that because my hope is that the committee doesn't focus most of their energy on things other than racial equity. So I just want to throw it out there for what it's worth.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, no, I don't think if by any means we're trying to like water down the mission or anything like that. I think racial justice is for sure still an important part of this committee. I think it's just as a way of, you know, so when we do touch on other other issues, it's not like, wait, but you're the racial justice committee, why are you touching this thing? You know what I mean?
I do.
I think, yeah, so I think it's still very much a focus on racial justice and just allowing ourselves to kind of open up to a larger scope of our community.
So what was the addendum to the name?
The addendum.
Racial justice and
Social equity committee.
social equity?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. As I recall, Doug was very interested in that in the beginning, if I'm not wrong about this. He was concerned about the social aspect. So I appreciate the fact that you're coming around to that way of thinking, I guess is a good way to put it.
Oh, yeah.
By looking into that more so in branching out and what you're doing.
Mhm.
Doug was very passionate about that, kind of got swept by the wayside or whatever. And I'm sure that, you know, I'm not trying to speak for him, but I'm sure he'll be happy about that aspect.
Yeah, I think, yeah, a lot of people who are kind of involved in the formation of this committee. I remember we were kind of advocating to have social equity somewhere in there, like Doug and Kyle and, so it's, yeah, I'm glad to see that we can kind of bring that forth.
Thank you.
Racial justice is still part of social equity. It's not like it's two
Sure.
different things.
Yeah, totally agree, yeah.
It's not like they expand the name, better fit our overall.
And I can, you know, when we made the committee, we probably purposely left it fairly vague with some goal posts to stay within, and it's good to see you guys are involved. What makes sense. Okay, anything else?
Oh,
No further questions? All right.
All right. So we have two planned purchases. The first one is a little more traditional, which is change for the grader. They're coming in at $1,372.97 from McLeod's.
Where am I, why am I drawing like here, where am I looking?
It's not in your packet. I got it today. Yeah, we buy change from them on a regular basis. We have pretty specialized needs for the grader. And the
You're keep it full, sorry.
$1,372.97.
The other purchase.
The other one that's a little bit less traditional, I just want to inform the board. We have a large tank that we'll be using for both sodium chloride and brine that we are purchasing for $0.
That's an easy one to approve.
Yeah.
We can't get paid to keep it?
It has a right to be purchased back by the provider, but they want it covered by our insurance while it's on our property. So they are selling it to us for $0, and they will buy it back for $0, and we'll be responsible for any damages.
Is this contingent on getting supplies from them?
They are our current supplier. We would have to, I would imagine, because they have that option to buy it back from us, they probably would buy it back from us if we started using a different supplier. But we've been using them for chloride for quite a while.
And it will work with both chloride and brine,
Yes,
and they don't care.
not at the same time or anything like that, but
They don't have an issue with us putting that in.
no,
I think it's already down there.
Lisa.
it is, and they,
Jason, you remember, he's like, yeah, that's the tank that we don't own. that we
You're
just don't
right,
chloride.
it's our buying tank, yes.
yeah, they had loaned it to us, and they decided that they didn't like loaning it to us because they didn't like that it was covered by their insurance on our property without any oversight from them about how it was used.
Makes sense. Yep.
Well, that's a good thing. At least they're not offering us Super Bowl tickets
Yeah.
to keep buying stuff.
What's wrong with that?
Okay, so that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Nothing else?
No, that's it.
Any board members have any questions, concerns? If not,
I'd say go about business, but with us talking about purchasing a grader next year. You and Jason can go about business, trying to make sure that there's an expansion joint or whatever, where we're not having to pay this again next year because we got bigger tires
We just resell the chain separately.
for a loss.
We, depending on the grader we purchase, we might have to sell the chains. There's,
Try
yeah,
to think about it. You can't, you know,
yeah, absolutely. It's something that we will keep in mind about, you know, the chains and everything else, and the cutting blades and everything else that we have invested in the current grader. How much of it can we reuse
yeah.
before we buy a new grader that's an entirely different type?
Gotcha.
But the cost of the change is small compared to the cost of the grader, so.
That's true.
I won't be around, my input will be negligible, but, you know, with the work that we put into that grader, it's kind of rebuilding numerous things on it. You know, I wish the board would consider pushing it out another year or two. Myself, town would save a lot of money.
I was thinking the same thing, Mike, because I recall, I don't know who I was talking to, but one of the guys I was talking to back in the summer was saying that graders, they like the grader as it is, so. I don't know what that means, and can't remember who it was, maybe they don't all agree. But, yeah, we can talk about it.
I think also that with the chloride and the extra chloride that we're making sure that we put on, and because we are on top of grading the roads now, I don't think the grader is going to be put through quite as much strenuous work as it was before. And so under those circumstances, I think it could last longer. So I wish the board would really consider putting it out a year or two.
It's a good point. But you end up potentially shooting yourself in the foot if prices go up. And they say, man, we saved 10,000, we spent 25.
That's true, but who knows? A lot of municipalities have graders a lot longer than we do.
Certainly do.
You spend money on them, and even if you cost average, you know, some certain overhauls on certain parts that go bad on these is still cheaper than buying a new one. So, I mean, that is one of our biggest expenses. If it is not our biggest expense, it is greater. And so,
It is our single most expensive piece of equipment.
so I think that the board should look into it. But again, you know, I won't be around there, and that won't be either. But hopefully the two new board members will concur.
Well, I would like to see the cost analysis of what we would get for selling ours while it's very operational right now too, because, you know, maybe it ends up balancing the, yeah, we picked from the grader. We're gonna make that up by selling the grader we have right now. And it's a wash. We don't know.
We're getting a little bit off topic, that's a next board's discussion.
I got off the topic trying to plan.
Yeah. I guess next item up is reviewing the proposed budget.
All right.
Some of the changes you had. Or, let's see, we took out the economic development coordinator.
Yep, let me get this set up. Okay, so people at home should be able to see this now.
We used to have 4 participants at home.
Right now, yeah, we just have 4.
We used to get some great ratings. Yeah,
So you moved on to the budget, you're not talking about.
no. we did
No.
the budget.
But it's on the.
Yeah.
You took it out.
Took it out of the budget, yeah. Sorry, that's
Yeah. So doing this a little bit quickly, I've made the changes that the board requested last time, but I did catch one, that's the salt. Let me get down to that. Salt needs to be fixed, that does not reflect the board's most recent request. But other than that, this should reflect the board's most recent request. with a couple changes to end of year estimates and proposed inside the highway department with a couple increases for things like dust control and others. And an increase for the estimated end of year personnel costs to be compatible with the 6% raise that we gave employees back on January 1st.
And the budgeting is including a 3% raise January 1.
For next year, meaning it's 3% over what we're paying today.
It's built in, I mean, it's a crapshoot.
It is, we're still on that.
But we never know what it's gonna be.
It's built in. And for the highway employees, there's a fifth employee in that budget item.
There
An
is.
extra 4,000 for overtime. I think that was.
The overtime, I don't remember what the overtime figure is offhand, but the overtime is the same that we usually calculate overtime for.
I thought there was a no. So like additional 4K per day overtime. 1.345. Additional 4K to pay. That's kind of off the paper. But
Pay overtime.
Yeah. Right, so that is, right. As I recall, that is worked into the end of year estimates for this year, given that we're gonna be paying
extra and overtime.
extra on overtime for some employees. But with some of our employees, like Mark's salary, I think it's worth a little bit of a calculation for trying to work that in because his overtime rate is quite high.
I got you. Under buildings and grounds,
Yep. You had wanted the historical society split out, and I have not been able to do that yet.
but almost be worth, next year or something. It's
I think that's probably what we'll do next year.
it's quite a few expenses.
Yes, they've got about, I think it's 7 lines dedicated to the Holcomb House itself.
And that's just grounds.
Good idea with it, especially for revenue too.
They do have 2 line items for revenue. Rent and then what the town pays itself.
A line for fundraising. No, that goes in there.
It goes in.
That's what the town, that's the date.
In lieu of- Didn't we talk about raising that and then we said that we paid for it, so we'd be increasing the expense on it.
They had already raised it themselves.
They had raised it beyond what we were considering raising it to. So in that early draft, it was just not properly reflected that the increase had already been.
The board to think about is to do some good work of Brian found a policy. The board had a case that dealt with nonprofits. It's sort of not completely out of the realm of the policy to put a separate article in, but the understanding from the policy we had was once the voters approved it, it would go into our select board's budget. Basically, that's what I'm saying. So I
Correct.
guess the question is, knowing now we have a policy that's sort of a little bit against what we're gonna do this year or proposing to do. One, do we put the articles, nonprofits back into our current budget? Or do we leave them out like this and look at changing our policy?
Interesting you bring that up. I've been thinking about this and I've had a change of heart. And you all are gonna say it was my idea, and it wasn't.
You can take credit for it.
I did, however, make the mistake of putting out an incomplete thought in the meeting in terms of how we handle these things. I'm not totally satisfied with the way that we handle the service organizations in the budget, because it's kind of set it and forget it. Without following your that's the problem. I don't have a better solution. What we came to was separating it out into its own article this year. What I don't like about that in particular, I think it kind of makes people feel good, like they've got a little more control over the budget. In reality, it doesn't really. They can, I mean, if somebody wanted to cut it out of Article 4, they could cut it out of Article 3 from the 4, same process. The way David moderates on meeting, he doesn't let people edit line item by line item on the budget. The other thing that I don't like about it is that we think, I don't like doing things the same way all the time just because we've always done it that way. That's no reason to not change. Except when it comes to budgeting, when people get the new budget, they want to compare it apples to the old budget. And if we change the format and pull out $30,000 and put it on its own article, well, then people are comparing apples and oranges. And it's tough to communicate that nuance to people and say, yeah, hey, look, we've got a lower budget for you this year. So great. Say, well, except for Article 4, which adds another 30,000. So that's my spiel about why I think we should just put it back in the way we always have. I think in future years, it would be good to think about how to follow up with these service organizations. Maybe employ the service officer position to lead a group to kind of do a bit of an audit of these things. But I don't think this is the best way to do it. I think we should not do it.
If I remember correctly, that policy even directed that the nonprofits would give an annual report, which I'm not sure. Wasn't it something like that, or?
Is there anybody that doesn't?
Or at our request?
Most of them do.
Most of them do.
Okay. Yeah, that's right, it's slipped into the town report.
Yeah. I was looking at a couple other town reports in ways that a couple other organizations did it. There's one that I like to look up that they did vote on all of them individually. But what they had done in their town report is they had, the report of, Vermont Council on Aging. They gave their report and then they said, see Article, 8. Then the report from different organization, Meals on Wheels, see Article 9. Like that, so you could tie the report pretty clearly to what you were voting on.
I like that too.
It does make for longer ballots because we're voting on each one individually, but I thought that it very clearly tied performance to the vote and the authority to collect or receive money from the town.
But then the whole question of, would we make them get a petition every year to have an article, or would we on our own put it in? I think it'd get messy. After we've done it a certain way for a number of years.
I think Matt's got a really good point about changing, the end of January, how we report on this.
I think for myself too, I allowed him to talk me into it.
I think you understand the way it is with board changes.
I still prefer having them broken out as different articles. That's the part what you're saying.
But you're saying each one individually,
Each one?
Yes,
that's what, 15 or 16 of them?
yes, okay. Put them at the end of the meeting. No one's gonna wanna talk about them at the end of the meeting, just wanna leave. Put them at the end of the meeting, at the end of the articles. But I think they should be separate. If we're really talking about understanding what these services are and how they benefit our community, and if anyone has a problem with that delivery of service, vote it up or down. People are gonna vote. There might be one of these people talk about. We're not gonna talk about all of them.
Not particular, member of the public that was speaking toward one of these, if he feels that way, but there's probably other people that feel the same way. So I don't have a problem with going back to the way we did it years ago. Vote on individual ones, and Beth has a good point, put it at the end of the meeting. You know, so it doesn't get bogged down for an hour or two right in the very beginning. So. I have no problem with that.
What do you figure, Rose, right? Doesn't matter.
It's a good compromise once we get it in the town.
I missed part of that speech.
That's all right. Wasn't that great?
Usually you're pretty well thought. I did hear you say that they wanted to cut out, or they cut it out Article 3. But Walter Pomeroy's word stuck with me a little bit about how the town meetings are only bringing the power to the people, and having this separate does more fighting, however you want to word it. I do agree it shouldn't bog down the meeting if we get doing it. Saying that people just willy-nilly say yes to everything at the end of the meeting because they want to get out, but for the people that support them, they won't say.
So if I did a poll, who would like to keep them in the budget and who would want to pull them out?
I don't want an individual article.
Who's like it pulled out like this?
Where it's, you know, it wouldn't be Article 4, it would be Article
Yeah.
10.
Whatever article it is, but in this format. All in one.
They're not necessary.
I think I heard Beth say separate articles for each.
Because then you have the option, because then,
Now it's only 6 pages long.
I don't care, who cares?
You don't have to budget for more people.
That's good.
The one article for the way it's written, it's either all or nothing, right?
No, you could
You could carve
amend,
out something.
somebody could amend some amount of money out of that.
Okay,
Yeah, they could have amended money out of the budget.
true, but I mean, I'm talking about carving out. In other words, somebody just picks on, and I'm not gonna throw a name out so that people
You said my
think I'm
name.
picking on it, but Joe Small's outfit or something. And somebody said, well, you know, they've treated me badly, and somebody said, well, they treated me badly too, and they said for $800. Could they carve out $800 out of this? Yeah. Okay, well then leave it the way it is, and if somebody wants to carve out one, they have the opportunity.
But they could do that anyway in the regular budget.
That's true. But at least this is all listed, that they can do it. They're not gonna try to carve out, they're not gonna go to our budget like this. I have never seen anybody go to the budget and try to carve out something, except
Walter.
Walter, you know, he did it, but I mean, it's, how often does that ever happen?
Well, they're frustrated with it because they say, I want to cut line XYZ. And David says you can't cut XYZ. He says you can cut X number of dollars from the total. But you can't, the select board has the power to decide where that comes out, which.
Okay, so then how do we get around this with the Article 4? Each individual one then?
The only way to do it is to vote on each.
Okay.
But this would give voters more power because if they amend our, if we left it in our budget, they can amend our budget, let's say they don't like Salvation Farms, I'm just picking on one for particular reasons. They're in for $700. They could amend our budget to take out $700. Well, out of our full $3 million something budget, $700 could be tucked somewhere and never touch Salvation Farms, so the amount of power of the voters is lessened. If it's in this particular article and they amend it to take out $700 total, they may not be able to identify Salvation Farms, but the board then is going to be committed. Out of this total of 32,000, we got to take $700 out. We'll probably follow what the voters have said. So in that sense, the voters do have more power.
So you're basically saying that you wouldn't have to have individual articles. We could leave it the way it is.
I believe you could, because if they took $700 out, well, our only option, the select board could take so much money from each of the
Each
different,
one of them.
right, and keep Salvation or Salvation Farm.
We did that once before, right?
But typically, a board would listen to the voters, and if the voters voted out, amended our number here of $700 and identified a certain nonprofit they didn't want to support, the board would normally,
I can see some people on town meeting day, if we go back to the format, some people are gonna speak up and say, I thought this was decided years ago, that this was gonna be lumped into one deal. And that we wouldn't be wasting 2 hours to discuss this.
That's up to the voters, they're the ones who waste 2 hours, not us.
That's true.
So I think.
Can't argue with that.
To your point, Eric, that ideally, the voters will be that clear with us. But in reality, what's gonna happen, the person is gonna come up and say, Salvation Farms, and the other person B will come up and say, well, actually, Salvation Farms is great, but this other organization is not where, so you'll get you'll get a range of views on where you should cut that. I'll tell you to cut $200 or $700. You'll have to decide which one.
so now you're advocating for single articles.
You don't want it.
Yeah,
I don't like that
right.
idea. I don't like that idea at all. So anyway, you know where I stand with that. It's
Well, I guess we have like 3 options. One is to leave this in our budget. Another one is, the second one is to have it presented in the format displayed here. Or a third option is to have them displayed every nonprofit individually as an article.
Are those the 3 scenarios you found when you were researching?
Yeah, I don't think I really saw anybody who was doing, I can't think of any other option for doing it. But the policy wasn't really too specific about what our conduct had to be, which is kind of what I was saying, that we could do it the way the board envisioned, and we wouldn't exactly be running counter to the policy, but our decision should be informed by our existing policy. But yeah, our policy, the line I'm thinking of in particular is at their sole discretion may include these requests as line items in their budget. So it is at your sole discretion.
That we could or we could not.
Yeah.
so let's go with the middle ground. Let's just keep it this way.
But make it the last article.
Yeah, we can move it around.
One article at the end is fine.
I'm gonna move that we break it out as separate articles. For each of the 50%.
The
Did you hear what
motion,
she said?
Here,
we have a motion and a second to break out the nonprofits as individuals, articles, stand on their own. During discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
No,
Nay.
and the chair votes negative.
This will be the only vote that we have, just you and I.
one vote is
Only 100% of the same size.
So, just to formalize this. I mean, we'll be voting on the whole warning anyway, so we don't have to vote on how the
Yeah.
format's gonna be, but am I gathering general consensus to have it presented the way it's presented here?
I'll move it to the end of I'll use the same language, I'll move it to the end of the binding resolution, the binding.
Actually, we're gonna be talking about this later on.
Yes, we're gonna have to, we're not really done with that or done with the budget yet, so,
So leaving it out of the budget, back to the budget, and any other items on the budget we need to discuss.
So we're gonna have in 2 cents.
it is right now
50%, whatever that comes out to.
2 cents.
Just 2 cents, right?
Yeah, it rounds off to 2 cents.
Okay,
but if you're comparing apples to apples, it would be 3.5 cents.
Well, that will be the decision for the voters, whether they want to increase the taxes or improving all of those.
No, that's true, but if you want to compare the spend year over year.
So I guess I have a generalized question about the skate parks reserve fund.
Yep.
Is that for specific items that they're?
It's for,
Because they're going up.
it's the way their money comes in. It comes in on one fiscal year and it gets, most of it gets spent on the next fiscal year, July 1st. So the money goes in that reserve fund and back.
And it's earmarked for their spend.
that's probably true, their reserve fund is different than a lot of the other ones because they can spend it on operating things because their season spans 2 fiscal years. But they do try and any funds that they're able to save and generate, spend on durable improvements. So there's a little bit of operating in there just because they sometimes need cash on July 1st. The middle of the summer, the middle of their high use season. But regular improvements are also paid out of that. And those are for durable improvements, and that's the.
So that's not like whatever the proposed budget was, that there's funds left over, they roll it in. Use it type of.
That's the way their system is set up, any unspent money goes into their reserve fund.
So come July 1, we'll write a $5,000 check to go in there.
Yeah, so
On June 31st, we'll do that, and then we'll budget them $11,800 off of that. And they already have $8,000 on hand. It's just a question, nothing's changed, it's just.
So backing out the community service organization is 3%. The 2 cents on the $300,000 property, that'd be about $60.
of course, if the article, all the nonprofits gets approved, it'll add almost a penny and a half to your tax.
So you're talking another $45.
And then you add in the economic development for 40,000, and there's 2 cents.
And we're over inflation.
But it would be up to the vote.
Right. This isn't a bad budget, though, the way it stands.
No, and it actually, it's with the 5th employee, which I didn't think we'd be able to fund that.
Well, definitely.
We're budgeted to have a 5th employee.
For the public works discipline.
Distracting.
The Pip and Play, I.
Eben, you had a good question about how we're using that. It's what goes into the reserve fund for money unspent is also modified by their, not just the money that they underspent, but, if their revenue wasn't up, like if their revenue declined, which it did this year, the amount that we could donate to their reserve fund would also decline. If that makes sense, it's.
We could talk about it later.
Okay.
It's fine.
But yeah, you had a good point that they will probably receive a donation to their reserve fund and have an increase next year for what they're asking for the tax contribution.
So typically, we have Susan, who's really good with spreadsheets. And her eyes have never been on it. She will sit down and go through it and try to find any adding errors or anything like that. So while I think we're pretty close to the board to approve this budget as presented, it might be good to let her do her stuff magic. We're gonna have to probably meet again with the warning. Could be a short week meeting possibly, but that would be a time to approve everything in one shot.
Yep. Yeah, the only change that I'm aware of that still has to go on in this, is to the salt budget, which in this draft isn't reflective of what you asked for the salt budget to be changed to last time. So I'm gonna take care of that. And I'm gonna have Susan check for errors, just so we can have another fresh set of eyes on it. So I'm, without any requests, I'm not anticipating any further substantive changes to the agenda or the budget.
Brian, do you know what other towns are coming in at?
I don't. I haven't really had I've got a meeting with a couple other towns, I think tomorrow morning, so I can ask.
That'd be great. Be interesting to see how we compare.
I was speaking to the nuisance citizen this morning about our budget. I should have asked him about if he knew anything about our neighbor's budget, but
Be in the paper this week then.
yeah.
I'd be interested in Cambridge and Hyde Park very specifically.
I can get those easily.
Cambridge is a lot. Are you talking about a specific increase?
Yeah, but the rate increase.
Okay. We're ready, we move on to the fire contract.
Are we coming back to the warning?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because I have a. Good, I mean, you're welcome to stay.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay.
No, I am, okay, but how do you guys?
Budget.
Good.
So up, you've got the village fire service contract. This has an increase of 4.75%. Contracts we should keep an eye on and should review. We updated the contract a couple of years ago after determining that it's been a very long time since it had been updated. It's good practice for us to keep on top of these things.
But we're finished with the budget.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come back to it. This agreement has our escape clause in it, right? Correct.
Good, let me see.
Just make sure. I'm not finding the language.
Letter seven,
Is it?
Yeah. I think so.
60 days.
Is that the language we had? 'Cause, I mean, the concern was, what if the town meeting, our voters, or the village's voters decided to support the fire department? We had to have a way out of this contract.
Well, number 6 talks about order approval.
Okay, that's probably what I'm looking for.
This
Yeah.
agreement shall become effective upon execution and shall be binding on the parties for the term of the agreement, subject to voter approval.
Okay, here it is.
The term of the agreement shall be January 1st and December 31st, so that's the excuse.
Why is the turn of calendar year if we have town meeting in March?
Because the village is the calendar year.
I don't think it's for a good reason. Like, I hear what you're saying for them budget wise, but they can budget the same way.
We had that discussion with them when
We made the request to change to fiscal year and they declined.
That was when we were gonna pay them half or something. It was gonna be kind of
I honestly don't remember enough of the details, but we requested to go to fiscal year, and they declined.
I don't understand what it's for.
Well, all of their budget and everything is on calendar year, so it's easier for them if
They wouldn't wanna inconvenience themselves for half of their department's paycheck. This has to be voted on at overtime, right?
oh, we have
That's
to,
part of the budget.
we approved this contract.
Yeah.
And look for authorization for the chair to sign, and then the voters ultimately decide when they approve our budget.
Yeah, if the voters slash our budget and the select board hears from the voters, you know, we specifically want you to, you know, we're cutting the $91,000 from the budget, and we specifically mean the money you're spending on the fire department. You know,
It's highly unlikely because we have one of those fire
Yeah.
departments around, so if you're looking for a motion to accept this, Mr. Chairman.
I don't, wait, before I accept, sorry, but the number 7 doesn't read right to me. The agreement may be renewed from year to year in writing by both parties stating any changes to the agreement or fees and prior to December 31st of the agreement year. Written notification shall be provided by either party at least 60 days before expiration of intent not to renew the agreement upon its expiration. Unless renewed, this is the part I have a hard time with, unless renewed or amended, this agreement shall expire on the 31st of any agreement year. So it says it automatically expires at the end of the agreement year. It also says that it requires a 60-day notice of expiration. And there's nothing about automatic renewal. So what happens on January 1st if this doesn't renew and there was no intent to terminate?
You're right, we have no contract right now.
well, it kind of says both. I think it's best. Am I understanding you right, Beth?
No, Eric understood it right. I mean, this says we don't have a contract. If this is the language that's used in our current contract, it says that we are not contracted with fire services right now.
Well, they say that, but it's not the case.
Well, I
When
mean,
you get into like
Seems-
liabilities and things like that, though, you know, it goes back to you don't know until something happens, right?
Yeah,
And I think we should not wait until something happens. I think we should say this contract automatically renews unless terminated by whatever party.
I mean, I think the way we've been operating is they've been providing us with a budget number prior to December 31st. They usually, in December, they decide what they're gonna pass over to us. We're aware of it, but we haven't started our budget yet, and it's just a timing thing.
Right, and if that's the case, I think that the verbiage should be that this contract automatically renews with the terms within the contract until the renewal is signed. But not that it should not expire.
But I guess we have to somehow address the financial side, because financially, we've only currently paid until December 31st.
Sure.
They're honoring it, we're honoring it.
So we can say something like, we follow this automatically renews, we follow the contracted price until a new renewal contract, at which point we will retroactively pay the difference.
Yeah.
But I think we need to not have the contract terminate.
Okay.
That's a good discussion to take back. So,
Well, in that case, we can't act on it.
right,
But we don't. So let's act on it tonight. Let's act on it tonight with this contract, and then address that again later.
That would be probably the thing to do. We could approve it tonight and then the board could give with the trustees and make an amendment to this particular document.
Because they're the same old words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make a motion, we approve the fire contract as written. Authorizing the chair to sign with the stipulation that it be number 7 be tightened up by this coming year.
we have a motion, we have a second. Second, discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You got a good one, all good?
Yeah.
Okay. True board appointments.
We make sure the new board gets it straightened out.
And told us for-
You don't get to 2023, this time in 2023.
That's a really good point, thank you.
Yes, Lauren Finkelman has been attending several meetings and would like to assist in the board's work. Sue Lovering, board's chair, recommends her for appointment.
Board's pleasure. So moved. Motion, got a second, any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed? Town meeting format draft warning.
All right. So you've got a warning in your packet, and you also have a warning on a separate sheet of paper that I've got a couple updates, where I received a couple updates. Article 4, well, the first Article 4, was expanded out to cover all the different groups, and to describe that. My concern on the first draft was that it wasn't specific enough to say that we were going to expend $33,000 for community service organizations without detailing anything about how we were going to spend the $33,000. So I made that change. Article, let's see. The second Article 4 is getting, all the rest of these are going to get changed. But using their printed numbers, Article 6 has new language that we received from our attorney. It's pretty similar to the draft, but it reads, shall the town of Johnson withdraw from the Lamoille North Modified Union School District?
Brian, that's not on Australian ballot item?
Yeah, that has to be Australian ballot.
That should be Australian ballot?
So that'll have to get moved. I guess a good question before we go any further is typically the format has always been the Australian ballot items first. And then everything that we vote from the floor
Second, okay, I'll make that change.
And let's see. There's one other thing that the very last article has to be any other business to bring
Yeah.
before this board or this town.
Does it need to be a informational meeting on that?
Yes. There'll have to be an informational meeting scheduled 10 days, within 10 days.
Yeah, 10 days.
Let's go up.
Yes.
Yes, and we'll have to set that in the warrant.
Does that not feel like it's really a process at all? Hopefully Walter will be here for the information meeting and because
I think Walter and Mark are both, well, I don't know about Walter, but Mark is holding up on it.
What?
Yep.
Called and left a message. Nothing.
Oh, look, I
Uh,
call it a couple times.
yeah, and Article 9, I don't have the seats for the school board,
There's just 1 3-year seat this year.
1 3-year seat.
Yes.
That'll get changed too.
So on the second article 4, if I may.
Yep.
I was reading the village trustee meeting minutes from this last week, I guess last Monday. And the impression I get is that their understanding of any potential community economic development coordinator position would work is a lot different than kind of what we're moving forward here. In cooperation with the village of Johnson. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's. Just to me, they seem to be on a totally different page from where we're going. So this seems a little, what's that?
I would delete that section.
In cooperation with the village of Johnson. So would the understanding then be that we would go this along without the village? Or to me, it just seems like this isn't really. But
Yeah, I think what I read in that meeting minutes was they were talking about it being a town employee and they might contract for certain services.
It almost read to me like they were trying to contract a different firm.
they were going to.
Just gotta say it, like Greg Tatro said, there's this lady in Burlington. For drinks.
It just seemed like a much different vision than we had. Specifically, they said, well, it looked like the town was interested in hiring a joint employee, which is true, not interested in hiring a joint employee, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't have a memorandum of understanding or some sort of, which I think is an awkward situation anyway, that was told, but I just, putting this out there to the voters, I'm not sure we really understand.
I just can't believe this, we're not on the same page as the
Well,
village is on the same page as us.
that's sorry.
Well,
Strike that down, that's this kind of joke.
It's,
it would have to be in cooperation with the village, because $40,000 isn't to fund an employee. Might as well strike the whole article, and strike that one portion, because who are we gonna hire for that? A lot of them.
There was some talk, we had that meeting about this, you know, kind of pay them as we go, like, you know, like a contracted service. Instead of an employee. We were about that.
Well,
If we could possibly do that, we would be, I think, better off to do it that way.
What if we
can
said,
I interject?
Anytime.
That talk specifically was about grant writing, which is important. This position is not a grant writer, it's an economic developer who also writes grants.
Right.
It's a portion of their job, so you can hire out a grant writer. I don't know if you can hire out an economic developer for town, I could be wrong, on a piecemeal basis, seems like kind of an odd idea.
what if
It'd be
we
worth
said,
finding out.
what if we said, authorize the town to appropriate and expend up to $40,000 for the purpose of community and economic development?
Too broad.
You're not gonna get much
No.
economic development for $40,000.
Wait a
yeah,
second,
it was-
wait, let me finish my thought, please. The reason I say that is because this article is about hiring a position or adding a position. We don't have to add a position. We could add a position, maybe, but we could also use those funds to contract services out, which is not the same thing.
And with your proposal, it would give us some wiggle room to work with the trustees if they put something in their warning before the voters.
Yeah, it kind of knocks down the walls.
I agree with contracted services. It's a better deal.
I don't think you can find that.
I think Evan's right there. I don't think you could find a contracted services for an economic development. Anybody can write, well, not anybody, but a lot of people can write grants. That doesn't mean they've got vision to looking for grants.
You're not gonna hire an economic developer for $40,000.
No, that was half.
That's
Kelly's just gonna pay half. That's 80, which is probably still can't hire somebody and pay them benefits for that, but
We
I
could
still can't
hire,
believe they wanna do that. They would do that.
we could hire a project manager, a 50% project manager, that would fill the same purpose. And maybe the project manager is working with somebody who's a grant writer, or project managers don't have to be a full-time project manager on a single employer. Like, it doesn't have, I'm just saying, like, if we're serious about economic development, and since I joined the board and well before, there's been a million conversations around how we need it. So if we need it, why aren't we putting it out there? Instead of just saying we need it throughout the year and then not doing anything about it. We have the opportunity, why wouldn't we take it? And if it's too vague, the taxpayers will tell us it's too vague by voting it down.
Voters are going to keep it, continue to go.
Right, well, there you go.
When we start, it was a good thing.
So it's already been approved.
once.
15 years ago.
However long.
but it was a shared employee.
Yeah.
And
Was
that
shared
was-
along with the administrator position was shared.
Well, if what you're saying is reading the trustee minutes and you don't think they're on the same page with the select board, then this needs to be ironed out before we go forward, right?
Or give us language where we could work with them.
This gives us language where we can work with their.
We need to be on the same page, or this is gonna fall apart.
One thing they haven't seen yet is our language, and they have not even started this process yet, they're a month behind us. But at least if they saw our language, they could put something in, hopefully similar.
What's the deadline for the town report?
So the printer, that's it.
They haven't even started any of their budget, they start in February.
We're gonna put an article out for the voters. They do care with it, but the most important thing is that we can present it in a coherent way and not just say, well, it's for
Exactly. Right.
community development.
Well, how is it coherent to say that we could use it for economic development purposes?
That's what I'm saying. What do you think?
That's what you proposed.
I would start out there, because we're talking about not being able to find a coordinator.
Yeah, I guess
So
we gotta be on the same page, I would agree.
it would be to fund a position for contractor service, which is a coherent thing to say before the voters.
I like that.
And they could wish us good luck to find that contractor person.
People really like that stuff. People like having a lot of different pieces going on.
See, I think even if we had $80,000, it's hard to find.
Well, this could authorize us to do it, and then we can get into the nuts and bolts later, right?
You're gonna be limited to how much you spend.
As a voter on that, I would decide.
We can't
Well,
have nuts and
it's,
bolts of it.
We gotta fish and come bait. Gotta do something.
When do we need to have a decision?
27th.
What's the day on, next Wednesday? That's when we've got our next joint meeting.
26.
So 20.
One to be listed by 30.
Yeah, 26th is our
Joint meeting.
joint meeting.
So maybe add this as a topic, or
So we could try,
some kind of commitment from it.
But you gotta sign the warning that night.
We have to sign it that night.
Yeah, I gotta go to print on the 27th.
no,
So,
I think that this language covers a lot of bases. I think that what we have work to do on improvements to make is our coordination with the village. But I think that this would let us do a lot of different things to coordinate with the village. But I think to tell the voters, we gotta tell them that we have a plan of what that looks like.
so what is that? What is it?
I think that this language would be fine to include
Yeah,
What language? The language as it's written?
as it's written. Would be fine to include for most things we might agree to with the village. But I think it's very important that if the village is, and I think you're right, that we do have very different outlooks on this right now. We do need to improve that in order to get anybody to believe us that we're serious about this. We have to coordinate with this, but
okay, I'm good with that.
I think that whatever agreement we can reach with the village, this isn't gonna get in the way of that.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm just gonna. I'm really worried if we tie this directly to the village that we put ourselves in a bad position. Because I already feel like we're not in a great position when we go into our joint meetings, because Ryan, you're doing the bulk of the work for this. And it's clear you're doing the bulk of the work for this. And without the village having a village manager, does that put this person in a similar situation that's really not a great situation to be in? That worries me if we tie this to the cooperation of the village.
But this position, if it was approved by both boards, or both voters, would not get filled until July. So I would hope that the village has a manager by July.
They're getting pretty close to a year.
Yeah, I know.
Seriously, if they're gonna have one, which.
My concern with it, I don't remember who said it earlier, but if it's only our funds, I don't think our funds go very far.
Yeah, if it's only our funds, we aren't gonna have something.
We're not gonna, because that's not. Well, I said 40,000 and you said they're gonna.
Fine.
I don't think they're gonna pony out 40,000. When they're gonna find $40,000.
We could take the mention of the village out. And like Beth said earlier, instead of saying that we're going to hire this position, say that we're going to spend it on this kind of activity. And leave it that way.
That's a harder question to answer to the voters. Okay, what are you gonna spend it on? You know, what are you gonna spend $40,000 on for development? Whereas they already know and they can visualize what a coordinator is because we had to lay it.
And it also, I think, sets a good expectation for, this is not a one-time cost of $40,000. We're hiring a person to do this job at this rate, so we can expect this.
To be in future budgets.
Right. And that's my biggest concern about taking the word hiring out of it is does that set a realistic expectation for what the next budget is gonna be like?
Kevin, you said you were reading the trustee minutes, that was the meeting in the January 10th, right?
Believe so.
So you were reading January 10th, we had a joint meeting later in the week. We had a joint meeting on the 12th, right?
No,
That was
no,
early.
But I was gonna say the
That was
12th was about the merger.
Yeah, the 12th was a pretty full meeting already, but we had to do the website and merger discussion.
But we had a joint meeting, and didn't we discuss the business for the economic?
We
I
did,
thought they were more on the same page with us then.
Yeah, it was, but read their minutes. Must have been back in December when we had that. Because I can remember we were having that discussion.
Okay.
When Dee wrote that letter. Yeah.
If we,
That was on the 15th of December.
yeah, if we had
I
the
think that's right.
article.
That's why it's kind of fresh in my mind, because I watched the whole video today.
Yeah.
But they were more with us then than they were in these 10th of January meeting minutes, I would say. They're more on the same page with us then.
Well, and candidly, I don't think they're on the same page with themselves. I think that there's a big internal discussion there about whether it's a good idea or not. Some of them don't want to do it, they are saying so, and some of them are pushing pretty hard for it. So
So you're saying it was window dressing when they were discussing it with us on the 15th of December.
well, I
That
didn't say that.
That meeting also got heavily hijacked with the grant writing portion of this job only. We brushed on economic development and tried to bring it back to that, but it was very heavily just. My recollection is it was very heavy on grants.
I can't believe the village is gonna find $40,000 to pony up for this on this total meeting. They're never gonna pony up 40,000. So the thing is, whoever said we ought to go this alone, we probably ought to.
So you wanna take this article and change 40 to 80.
Well, I don't know if that's a good figure or not, but we're not gonna get anybody for 40. 80, we might be lucky if we get somebody, if we're gonna hire a real economic developer. Or are we gonna go piecemeal with a grant writer that's gonna be contractual services or whatever, you know, this is kind of a real dilemma, this particular situation here. We wanna get the most bang for the buck and pay the least amount of money for it, but we're gonna have to pay, I think, to get quality service. So, you know, and put an $80,000 thing on top of that with taxpayers burden as it is, but then again, we have to do something.
Well,
You know, we have to move forward.
to go back into our budget and find that extra money.
Salt.
Salt, thank you, you have a fifth employee, yeah, any number of things to go back into the budget and splash.
But I think, like I said at a previous meeting, whether it was our meeting or a joint meeting, that we need to do something, and I talked about Leah with the 14 million, you know, she kind of paid her way. It wouldn't take much of a good bang for buck to pay that $80,000 either.
But again, you're talking specifically that.
Yeah, we're talking hypothetical too.
We are, I mean, she did bring in a lot of money. Almost, well, over half of that was just with one project, right, Bill?
Yeah.
So you said 8 million, she brought 14. that's
14 million total, right?
That was just one project.
but that also serves a good example of it's not realistic to expect that to pay for itself every year. It's, you make an investment so that, yeah,
Exactly.
Right.
Long term.
And then we have to start budgeting for some matching funds. Because we could pay $80,000 and they can get ducks in a row, and maybe if we could have somebody for next year's budget season. Tell us the grants that we should be looking at, but we don't have money to plug into that, where this is a position. strictly pushing paper right now, because we don't have enough funds to match grants if they got them anyways.
And unless we can explain this to the voters really well for everybody to understand, we're spinning our wheels.
I like, as weird as it sounds, I'm coming around to Beth's idea. I get that keeping the word hiring creates an expectation that this will be a position for future budgets. I agree with that wholeheartedly. If we take the hiring portion of it out, it allows us some funds for possibly hiring out grant writing if it's a good grant for us. It also allows us, if we have an employee that would like a boost in responsibility, in the town office that would like to take over some portions of grant writing or whatever, it allows us $40,000 for the purposes of community economic development.
They could promote into a position.
Yeah, it kind of allows growth, which employers should kind of be somewhat responsible for anyways. I like keeping the word hiring in there. I don't think we can go in front of the voters to place that. Everything that I heard, that the village is not gonna be able to pull me out, match higher contribution.
I mean, if we went to the voters for twice that, basically we'd be asking our voters, does the town see value in hiring an economic development coordinator?
But
With no expectation, but the thought would be is we would contract that employee out to the village, so for some rate of reimbursement,
so we're
but we don't know what that number is.
going on thoughts and hopes right now.
I think it would have to be the town willing to go it alone, knowing probably there'll be some amount of reimbursement from the village because we'll contract out. We just can't tell the voters it'll be 10,000 or it'll be 30,000. We don't know.
The predominant portion of projects for this position would probably be pretty heavily village related.
It could, but you know, a lot of the work was done by Leah for the village because of Main Street. But something that's different about that position and a conventional grant writer is a grant writer, you know, there's a grant out there, it's somebody that writes the grant. Yeah. What Leah did was she did all of the prep work to where you were even in the running for grants. And we're still seeing, I mean, she's been dead now a year and she hasn't worked for the town for I don't know how many years. And Lisa is still finding things that Leah had done that prepped us, that makes us eligible for grants that Lisa is writing.
That's true, it's really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, not to say we're gonna find another Leah, I wouldn't say that, but somebody of some lesser amount of caliber is probably out there.
Well, it's a good point. Maybe we could kind of push Lisa into that position.
I'm not sure if that's Lisa's background or even the direction she wants to go. That's a whole.
Yeah, I think it's an entirely
Point,
different
I'm gonna go back
conversation.
to it again, unless that we can explain this well to the voters on town meeting day, we should table it.
Well, we're trying to
Drop it.
figure out how to explain it.
Unless we can do a good job of convincing the voters, we need to forget about it right now.
If this was gonna be Australian ballot, I would say it probably go down. But if it's at regular town meeting format, then you can tell the voters and remind them of, we've already had this person, we had Leah. And we can also demonstrate how much money she brought to the community, and they all know it. I think it would pass.
You think about
I think it would pass.
it? Yeah, probably.
In a town meeting format.
Yes. But then you'd have some of these people that are working and couldn't go to town meeting, they would think something was told over them too.
Well, yeah, I mean, that, under that structure, we had a part-time town administrator. It's not, it was half time, was it half time in the village?
It was a 60-40 something.
Yeah, I think that's how it ended up. It used to be 70-30.
70 to
But
village.
it was, yeah,
So we have less than a part-time position. So now, so we replaced that with a full-time position. Okay. The idea was that, you know, we would have tons of time then for economic development with this administrative position. Of course, that's not the case because there's too much else to do.
Well, more happens every year.
So that's the difference. So we say, well, we've always had this position. Well, we had it, but we only had it part-time. Which we can't define.
I can't imagine how many part-time administrators.
That'd be right.
well, I mean, one of the reasons we split was because it really was more than a one-person job doing both village and town. Duncan was burning himself out. He never took vacation. He was working 60, 80 hours a week, and you know, you can't continue that. And that's why we did think that we could combine this job, and you know, that it would be enough time to do it. But as we find out, that you know, when you're in that seat, you're going to focus on the fires of the day, and all those fires are always coming, and you don't have the opportunity to think about the economic development and putting that time into building.
Well, we have a whole bunch of big things that have started, but we don't have a whole bunch of big things that have finished. And I think we need to get to a point where we have a whole bunch of big things that finish one at a time, they need to finish one at a time. And until we get somebody who can fill some portion of some role, we're not gonna finish some of those big things. So if we build this out so that it is spending $40,000 in a year, maybe it's picking one of those big things, maybe it's picking that light industrial park and saying, we're gonna hire you, contracted grant writer, to find us funds to fill a project manager and an architect or something. I don't know, whatever we figure out the right thing to do. But use those funds to contract those services to get those roles in place. That can just be part-time roles, like spend 80 hours on it and deliver, it's a project-based contract. Deliver what you have. We'll get moving on what that portion is, and then we'll prep for the next step, and we'll just keep incrementally moving forward. But if we don't start somewhere, we're never gonna get to the point where we can take those steps.
How does this sound? We ask the voters to authorize this $40,000 to put it into some kind of a fund or something. Don't say anything about hiring anybody. And for the purpose of community and economic development. That way, it doesn't look like we're getting another employee and paying all these benefits. This will just be a part of a reserve fund or whatever to do these particular things.
I like that idea a lot.
And so why don't we just go with show the voters authorize this 40,000? Somebody could say, well, I think 40,000 is too much. And how about 30? I mean, they could amend that if it's on the floor, right? Yeah. So why don't we just go into a fund and use that fund to hire a consultant, or like you said, to go after the industrial park and just hire an industrial park person to do that for us. So that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I don't think we need
to
a,
hire somebody or another employee.
I don't think we need a fund specifically for that. I think that we can,
Put 40,000 in the budget
yeah,
or whatever you want to call it. Potatoes, tomatoes, tomatoes. It don't make any difference. It just gets rid of the thing about another employee and everything else. And it's obvious we're going to have to go it on our own. We talked about that our next joint meeting, and just forget about the village. They're not going to pony up. We need to do this on our own.
It'd be worth bringing up at our next meeting, but I think we should proceed.
we should be prepared.
So what are we gonna have?
Somebody figure out the language.
To appropriate up to appropriate $40,000 for the purpose of economic development. In the town budget,
For the purpose of saving, so.
for the purpose of economic development. Or for the purpose of community and economic development.
There you go.
Do you want community and economic development?
Yeah.
That sounds good.
That comes about period.
I'm gonna rebrand Johnson with that.
Except for,
Plus,
And we have the money. it's there for
So
us.
should we add more like will be intent? With a project-based intent, something like that effect.
You know, we could tie that to the industrial park. You know, to get moving on that, because everybody talks about that. You know, get a crap or get off the pot with that, so if that was earmarked for that, to move that forward.
I think that can not be earmarked, but that could be shared in the town. meeting.
Part of the whole.
Because the first question they're gonna say is, what are you gonna do with the money?
Yeah, that's it.
well, go back to that same topic, the priorities. So, yeah, you got brownfields on there, you've got June property, you've got other things.
Yeah, we have a category of economic development.
You don't need that for a motion, just change.
No, because we'll have to approve the whole.
All right, well, that's language, do you have, that's.
Yep.
You wanna make a motion?
You don't need a motion. so-
We don't need a motion.
Yeah, we're not approving this warning yet, so we'll have to have the motion to approve the warning when we're ready for that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it's,
Yeah.
it's just workable.
I'll incorporate Brett's,
Yeah,
that's all.
time for us a week from tonight to get back together, just approve the warning, final approval of the budget. We should be able to do it in a short meeting.
Do we want to wait till we have the joint meeting before we do that?
Always.
Do
We-
want to wait for approval until we have the joint meeting?
Once or twice.
no, because the joint meeting's on the 26th, and Rosemary.
I know she knows, I know she's.
So if anybody wants a single word change. It's good vote. With amendments, but I think it'd be smart to just make something.
You know, we can talk to it, at meeting maybe, but I think we need to go.
Okay. When is fine.
As long as the majority's here in your form. Right, and all that stuff.
For Monday.
Right. They have to do it all.
Right?
Yeah.
It will be viewed, whoever signs the warning will be shown in the town report. If you don't sign it, you're not.
Perfect, I don't insist.
You didn't.
People talk about it.
Yeah, why is that?
We can also keep it at the window for you for, you know, if we're doing it on Monday where we've got a day or two, we can keep it at the window for you to come in and sign.
And, we're still looking, obviously, we're still talking like we're gonna have a regular town meeting.
Well, I want to bring up
Oh, yeah.
a couple things about that.
Brian, would you read back Article 4?
Article 4 right now reads as, shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to raise, appropriate, and expend up to $40,000 for the purpose of community and economic development.
That's it. Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about the town meeting format. I have not heard back yet from the school about what they want us to comply with in order to use the gymnasium. But I shared with you what I heard from Garrett Baxter, and I think I shared with you what I heard from our attorney Bob Fletcher today about masks and attendance limits and things like that. And it sounds like we will not be able to require masks or to comply with any limits on the number of attendees requiring social distancing or anything like that.
So people will just the buyer beware. You're coming at your own risk.
Well, it said we could encourage,
It,
not require.
we could encourage but not require. It did not, it was raised that there would or could be liability questions about it too.
About encouraging it?
No, about if we,
We tried to require it, and
but well, also the potential exposure that we have for people, that at the same time, somebody could say and challenge us that they were not able to attend because they were a high-risk individual.
So. I believe I was talking to Beth. But. Are people not allowed to contribute via Zoom, or is it just because the moderator can keep up with both? Online?
I don't think you can vote on.
Yeah, well,
Can't vote, but they can voice an opinion. Writing, that's probably.
I'm not sure, and I honestly didn't really investigate remote access and what that might allow.
I've been looping in Dave Williams on this. And first I asked him what his comfort level was being in a town meeting format. And he said as long as we're taking reasonable cautions, he felt comfortable being able to moderate. He did have a very interesting suggestion for those who choose not to, do not want to wear a mask, or anybody else, if we run into over attendance, which he doesn't believe it'll be a problem because
No.
you know, we don't have that many people go to town meeting, but if it did happen, is if we had an overflow room that could be, you know, closed circuit TV connected, and they would still be participating and everything, just like they're in the gymnasium.
It's library. And
that's what they voted.
Otherwise,
I got another thing I'd like to throw out. Would it be illegal to have those without masks sit on one side, and those with masks to sit on the other side of the auditorium?
It's a request we could make.
Well, yeah, and I think that maybe people that didn't have a mask would gallop, you know, would go to where the no mask people were, and people with a mask would sit with the people with the masks. Maybe they kind of do it on their own, but you know, there are people that don't want to be around people who don't have masks.
Yeah.
So they should be able to sit on one side and then the mask will sit on the other.
But we have to weigh.
I think it would be a slippery slope to make.
Well, probably it would, it'd be some kind of us against them and everything else, but you know, maybe they'll just do it on their own. Not even being told.
well, the alternate is we could make ourselves a mask mandate town.
We can't
Not
mandate the
revolving.
schools.
Schools within our town, and the school would have that. The school, I'm pretty sure, already has a mask mandate for their facilities.
They do, but even they can't force the voters.
Yeah, we can't. Discriminate on
And if there's.
Okay, well, maybe we set up a tent outside the gym doors, and if you don't want to wear a mask inside, you can attend from outside the gym doors. I mean, really,
That would be, I mean, it'd be bad enough to try to ask them to maintain a separation inside the building.
I don't
without
think-
telling
listen,
them to
I
stand
know,
outside.
okay, I just have to tell you that there are people that I know in this community who are very opposed to wearing a mask. However, in all of the basketball events that I go to, of which there are a lot, they're required to wear masks. They wear a mask.
I don't think it's an unreasonable request to make to anybody, but we cannot interfere with somebody's right to
To vote,
vote
I understand.
and to be represented, so we cannot make them wear a mask. But we also have the problem of if we don't make people wear a mask, for those people that feel uncomfortable around people who aren't wearing a mask, are we interfering with their ability to be heard and cast a vote?
That's why I propose that we have a tent outside the gym doors. We could have propane heaters away from the doors so they don't flow in. And it could allow for participation if you choose to not wear a mask. Do you want to wear a mask to come in? Cool. And then we, you know, block off the tented area so that, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there because I feel very uncomfortable holding a town meeting if we cannot require masks. And I understand all the reasons we can't.
The only difference between what Eric suggested and what you did is you said, if you're not wearing a mask, we want you to stay outside. Like.
Well, the
closer to
difference is
you
that we're
in the
using
room.
a school building, school facilities with HVAC that goes, or HVAC, like goes through all the things.
Oh, yeah, I log on this as well.
So like. They're still having to enter the building and walk through it.
Is the school required to allow us to have a town meeting that doesn't meet their mandates?
No.
So if the school came back and said, we're not allowing people in without masks, what kind of a river are we gonna be in for finding a location?
Yeah, we're gonna have a very hard time trying to come up with another location.
Then we got a great tent, like a whole parking lot right out here.
Politically, for the school, they're denying the right to assemble for the voters that are their voters as well.
Some towns have done that.
Have they done that?
They've done
Well,
that.
last year, yeah.
And we're gonna hire out Belvedere's.
Now, the vote was taken a while back for this upstairs to have masks on when you come to a select board. So it isn't a town meeting, kind of an extension of a select board meeting,
No, it is entirely different rules.
but you have all the select board there.
Yep.
But it's not our meeting, it's their meeting.
It's the people's meeting.
I bet, you know what, Mike, I bet if somebody pushed us on it, they could probably make a constitutional argument to not be excluded from the select board. Because
Yeah.
probably if they pushed it,
They could.
Yeah.
probably the same thing applies.
And it has to be national.
I think we say, listen, please wear a mask, and if you don't, we're not wearing pants.
Last select,
I mean,
last select board.
I mean, I
meeting.
say that, but it's just so ridiculous that people would oppose wearing masks that much.
The emperor's not wearing clothes.
It's just, it's an absurd idea, but it's just absurd that people would behave so badly.
It would be a weird meeting.
If we say masks are gonna be required or requested, whatever, and we have some available,
Yeah.
Out of consideration for your neighbors, please wear a mask.
I'm sure 99% of people are gonna wear a mask, whether they want to or not. It's that one person who bullheaded that we're not gonna be able to force them to leave.
I mean, we're all going to the grocery store with the same.
Yep.
We don't have
We
to
don't
answer
even
it
know what the
tonight.
school is gonna allow it.
Yeah, we don't know what the school is going to require. So I asked them about it and I know that they received the message and that they're having discussions about it.
They have a meeting, from what I understand, they have meetings tomorrow about facility access.
I imagine that's what,
All types of things, I would imagine this.
Yeah.
Mark told me that their insurance carrier would drop them if they did not mandate masks within their buildings for school function.
Yeah.
But this isn't a school function.
no,
Under the current unified union, that school isn't even the town of Johnson's anyway.
Technically, yeah. Portion of it is.
Yeah, but the school isn't our school, like it used to be years ago. So basically, we have to get permission to go to a building we pay taxes on.
Probably we're looking at 120 people there. 150 max. It's a big area. It's probably relatively safe. They're saying that we should be beyond this latest variant by mid-February.
Are you gonna allow lunch?
Let's decide that later.
Yeah,
I doubt seriously if we should allow it.
yeah, I would not.
Unfortunately.
Well, back when I was there voting on something after the event.
That is true, I totally would.
Can we take a recess and go outside?
Look out.
Should you allocate?
You won't wither away.
$50 to the American Red Cross?
But all this talk about school use, like, we probably need to, like, if there isn't access to the schools, then we would need to change all of our plans.
Yes.
So we should know that by Monday night, when we meet again.
Yeah, I expect I'll have an answer for that before then.
So if we have no place to meet, then we might not have an in-person town meeting.
We would either have to go to Australian ballot or delay the meeting date.
Or do it outside in May.
I like the 10 idea, if that's the case.
I like this idea
I
too.
don't want to delay till May.
No, I don't.
Your terms? I loved that when I heard that.
I mean, I kind of do. Just 'cause it's going on.
I think it's a conflict for,
It's down to 42 days now, right?
it's, I don't know, to extend my own term.
But yeah, if the school is going to say that we have to require these things,
It's really going to irritate a lot of people, considering.
We can't.
how much money everybody pays for taxes to school.
right, yeah, we can't require, we can't, if they say that for town meeting, we have to require a maximum occupancy or a mask to be worn, we can't. You know, depending on, we might be able to negotiate with them about maximum occupancy if there's a realistic number that we probably will not exceed. But
See what we do from.
Yeah.
Okay, and we ready to move on? Signage? Oh, now this is a request from the school, so this could continue.
Right, yeah, good negotiating.
Contingent upon town meeting.
Shall we vote to get out of that?
so
Unified school board.
are you fine with Jason
Right.
handling and adding a couple signs to the school area? I looked at the MUTCD, the municipal uniform traffic control devices. There are a couple more signs that we could use that don't require us to adopt a school zone speed limit. And a couple more signs that we could put up that wouldn't overload the limit of the number of signs that we have in this area.
Beth?
What are the signs we need to add? Sorry.
They're asking for school zone signs.
Sure.
Usually every time signs come up.
I'm sure that'll make,
I see.
I'm sure that'll make drug dealers go away.
But yeah, I'll work with, or I don't even think I'll work with it. I think I'll just ask Jason to take care of it. I don't think I'll help him if he needs it, but I don't think there will be anything.
American Rescue.
So this one is very interesting. I don't know how much you were able to read in the packet. I included a summary that's a couple pages, was that 12 pages long?
That's more than a couple.
Well, the whole thing was about 500 pages.
Oh, wow.
And the link that's in here is to another summary that's 50 pages. I did read the 50-page one, I did not read the 500-page one.
I think documents that big, like, there is not that much relevant information.
No, and really there are a couple sentences that are particularly relevant to us right now that I want to bring up. And that is under lost revenue. they finalized the rule for using ARPA funds. Does anybody have any questions about ARPA funds before I just launch into it?
Nope.
Okay. The rules on how to use the ARPA funds, they've issued the final ruling. One of the parts of the final ruling is how to handle lost revenue. And the final rule says that lost revenue, you can use two methods. One is a calculation based on a rate of growth, which is, 5% per year. So if you grew less than 5% each year, you can claim the difference in lost revenue. Or alternatively, you can claim up to $10 million as lost revenue. So we can claim all of our ARPA funds as lost revenue that we could have potentially grown enough, and we can bring them all in that way. If we do bring them in that way, they would become eligible for matching funds. So we could bring them in, and this now could be the transformative project that we hope for as matching funds to allow us to begin construction on the light industrial park.
So this could be, okay, given what you just said, that ultimately means that we could really spend the funds how we received it.
Yes. That's a better, and thank you, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'd be able to bring them in as general revenue, so we can spend them any way we see fit. I recommend that we still regard them as funds for the purpose of a transformative project, especially related to economic development, which is how the American Rescue Plan, that was how it was sold to us. When the federal government told us they were going to give all this money, they talked about, this is a transformative project for your community, and there's all these things you can do with it. And then we were really concerned for a while because it looked like we couldn't use it for matching funds. So how far we could go with the money looked really limited. But if we can use them for matching funds, that opens up a lot of doors for us.
Well, we could hire a full-time economic developer.
We could.
For
8 years.
yes.
Yeah, we could invest them.
Temporary, full-time.
That's just a number in
They're gonna finish by 2026, right?
Yes, I think that's the final date. We have to have them, I think we have to have them all committed by the end of 2024 and spent by 2026.
So a 3-year economic developer with matching grant funds.
Yep.
Still available.
Yeah.
All beyond us.
We're still citizens.
True.
Um,
Had to make a decision.
Another project for us for February, I still think it would be worthwhile for us to have a discussion with, VLCT has an ARPA coordinator. And I'd like to bring them in still for a discussion on all this.
Sure.
Because again, we have the money already, they gave all the money out.
Did we receive all of it?
I thought we got half of it,
I think you're right, but we will receive the other half.
yeah, sometime this year.
Yeah, and regardless of what we do with it, so the presumption is on us that we'll be spending it correctly, which is good and bad. It opens up that we have a lot of freedom and we can act very quickly. It also opens up pitfalls for if we do something incorrectly, we have to reimburse the federal government for any funds that aren't spent correctly. So I would still like to bring in somebody who's more well-versed in ARPA to discuss things with us before we make any commitments.
And we're something north of a half million.
In the end, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, and it like fits nicely into all the things we're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to, again, if we can use these as matching funds for an economic development coordinator, this can be a very transformative project and source.
Brian, you made a whole bunch of if statements. It sounds, and the way I interpreted what you said, and maybe it's because it is what you said. We do fall into the category from how you see where we fall. We do fall into the category of those funds are available fully, like.
The other, you know, there's a formula option, but the other option is up to $10 million. And that doesn't seem, as I understand it, that does not seem to be connected to the size of your budget. That is just up to $10 million can be claimed as lost revenue.
Can you do me a favor? I know, right?
It does.
Yeah, can you do me a favor and before the ARPA person comes to talk to us, which I would love to hear.
Yeah.
Before that, just outline, like, forget all these documents, just outline like a one-liner or a two-liner per potential option. And which ones, only are the things that seem to be applicable to us.
Sure.
That way, like, I just want to have a quick reference when we talk about this every time.
I'll have that for us before our, well, definitely before our joint meeting, so that if there's anything there we want to discuss with the village, we can.
That'd be awesome.
You know, 'cause it might impact our discussion about economic development. All right, that's the overview is, yeah, there's a lot of other changes in there, but the one I'm most excited about is the change in lost revenue.
And forget about, like, when I say the 1 to 2 liner, by the way, forget about the way we could use it. I just want to understand what we're eligible for and what the restrictions of that eligibility are.
Okay. Yeah, I can send that out.
Awesome, thank you.
It sounds too good to be
Yeah,
true.
I mean, we couldn't have wished for much, for anything any better.
There was always that, and I know that some other communities like Stowe, I talked to the manager in Stowe and their department, they were planning on using the formula to bring in a lot of it as lost revenue again, so that they could use it in a variety of ways, but
If we know we're going to use it for economic development and using that formula as lost revenue, means that we potentially qualify for less, but instead having more restrictions and qualifying for more, that would still fit into our categories of economic development, like, you know, we need to really understand that.
yep.
There'll be a lot of communities doing a lot of creative bookkeeping, I'm sure.
Well, with setting the limit at $10 million, I think a lot of communities are not going to get creative with it. They're just going to,
Yeah, Vermont, we know.
you know, say,
Our whole budget, 3 million, we didn't lose 10 million. That would be years and years.
well, it's for your ARPA fund. So we're happening in a lot of communities, their entire fund will be less than $10 million.
I mean, I think to show lost revenue, like, if you look at our taxes coming in, we're pretty much on par with most years.
Yep.
Maybe some amount of growth we lost, but you know, that's pennies compared to this. We couldn't justify much from lost revenue. The village might be able to because of their electric department, the water departments, they may have lost, you know, revenue, but for us.
That lost revenue formula was always going to be interesting for us, but I didn't anticipate it being able to bring in the whole fund. But I thought it might bring in enough to be eligible for something. But if we can bring the whole thing, that'll make a huge difference. So, yeah, that came out last week. And it's very interesting.
Next board meeting, we'll have the bomb. I think you wanted to, unless you got anything else on that.
No, I'm all good with that. That was a big news.
That
Now
is
you want to
exciting.
talk about do it properly.
That's a good lead.
Good leader.
So, yeah, it's been a newspaper story, there's been some discussion, recently, and every time somebody kind of tells it, there are a few more facts that get kind of distorted along the way, in terms of what was promised when and what, decided to do back then. So I've gone back and, through some meeting minutes and through some the studies that were done, through the other study, Yellowwood study in particular. So look at the history of the project, and kind of how we got to this point in time for the property. It's a 2-page that I've put together so far, it's a 2-page write-up. I don't know when to bring this up.
Just that you.
Just want to put it in town report.
I would like to put it in the town report. I don't want to have to I don't want it to be on behalf of the select board, I don't want everybody to have to sign on to it, but, I guess I wanted folks to be aware that I'm doing that. Maybe it's gonna be a time. So, folks are aware.
All for it being in the town report.
Criticize that gets put in the town.
That's the auditors.
The auditors will make the decision.
Yeah, I grandfather was very. I think there's a reason I wanted to make that in particular.
You want to ask more questions on it?
Funding opportunities?
No, but anyway, there's.
Promises to the voters,
What's that? Promises?
is that what you're talking about?
No.
We didn't promise a favor to voters and we decided to buy it. We just said that we were trying to do it without any cost to the taxpayers.
That's not what happened, actually.
Quite, really, yeah.
It was always expressed, from the beginning that, we would want to go out for grant funding to cover the costs of it. And that grant funding often requires matching funds. And that might need to only have some matching funds. And in kind of contributions, but there was never, we said we're gonna try not to spend a lot of tax dollars on it, but it was never, it's kind of come out that it was promised that we would never spend a dime on it, but that's not what happened at all. Another sort of thing that's interesting in going back in history is noticing that it was from the beginning really billed as something that was going to take a long time to come to fruition, that it was at least a 10-year project. And here we are 4 years in. People are talking about selling, like we're way behind on it. It's, I think, a reasonable case to be made that we're behind in that 10-year schedule, but not that we're so far out with that. Those are kind of the couple of points on the process. I don't want to editorialize, I don't want to push it one way or the other. I just want folks to kind of know, be reminded of what was promised and where we were. So, but I'm sure there's a reason I want to do that.
So if you think of it, we come back. Thank you. The MOU. Do it. Well, possible.
Possibly, so.
Now, we're all set, we're not going to have a mail out ballots for everybody or contact them, so.
I think that'll be decided when I have a better idea of what the town meeting's gonna look like.
Okay.
The warrant, like that warrants some other discussion if we have to change formats.
Well, this is a presentation from the village, right?
Yes, we've received, and you got it by email, and you got it in front of you now. A memorandum of understanding between the town and village of Johnson, responsibility for jointly owned buildings. They have their proposals that are broadly similar to what we discussed at our joint meeting for this purpose. I have some thoughts and things we might want to discuss about jointly owned property, but It's kind of up to the board if you feel that a deeper discussion on this.
If you take the old mill house out of the MLU, everything else, at least in my mind, is conceptually, it was conceptually agreed with the trustee. Does anyone disagree with that?
No, but I would add, this talks about in each building category, decisions on building maintenance and improvements will only require the affirmative vote of the select board or the village trustees or both. I would add maintenance improvements, usage, decisions around usage. Would be, also on the party that is paying the bills. So for instance, their intent is for Troy's office to move out of the mill house. Well, if we're gonna be paying for that building 100%, then we should be 100% in charge of how the building gets used.
So add usage to each of these lines about decisions on building maintenance, improvements and usage will require.
Yeah.
And then make it appropriate to each building.
The other thing I'm interested in fleshing out, and maybe this requires an attorney, is environmental remediation. That if one party does some sort of environmental damage or discovers some sort of environmental problem with their property, is the other party responsible for it? Or is it because it's the village garage, there was a spill or something? Is that completely on the village, or do we share some responsibility for that and vice versa?
I think that's a really good point, and I think that's a little bit more advanced than this document goes. If we're really, I don't want to say that we need to involve an attorney in this, but if it's really going to hold water about protecting us from liability, I think I would want it reviewed by an attorney.
I just think if they're going to be putting a lot of, I don't know how much money it's going to cost them for this village garage, but that's a big project.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential for things to happen there that would need to be liable for a decision that another board made.
I agree, I think we should have liability and insurance coverage clearly outlined, and I do think it should get legal.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good outline for kind of getting it in writing of how things are today, but it doesn't really do anything for us other than put in writing what our practice is. Yeah, which is something, but yeah, I hear you that we want more.
Beth mentioned insurance. I understand it. So it's all the same insurance. And how do they must.
The buildings are broken down with insurance.
It's like the buildings over there, the Tater property, are they split 50-50 all of them?
No, it's by building.
Okay, so the
So
village garage, only the village is paying that.
Yeah.
Insurance, okay.
Yeah,
So
we
from a
don't.
liability perspective, that's already broken out.
We're not protected in any meaningful way for anything that happened at the village property. If it was claimed to involve us, but we don't have it. The village garage is not covered on our liability insurance. The village garage is covered on their liability insurance. Yeah, could there be a claim whether somebody?
Because we're a half owner.
Yeah,
somebody could sue the town and village.
yeah, somebody injured at the village garage
And we get
claims that could claim that the town had some responsibility for it.
Sure.
And vice versa.
But maybe we would be covered for that. We just wouldn't be able to recover we wouldn't be able to recover damages to village property. You know, to the village garage.
So I agree with that's liability, there's lots of different types of liability, but insurance and liability often go hand in hand on big things, they have to go hand in hand.
Yeah,
And I do think, like, I wanna make sure we're good.
I think this needs to go before our attorney, because we don't know what we might be exposed to.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that it is definitely more complicated than that.
This is the beginning of this whole process, what we discussed here.
Yes,
The old mill house, the town will be responsible, 100% responsible for the maintenance and improvement of the old mill house. Decisions on the building maintenance and improvement will only require the affirmative vote of the town select board. Now, we need ownership of this property.
Yes.
Because, as we all know, the board could change. We could spend a lot of money in fixing it up, and then all of a sudden they say, you know, you have no agreement, you don't own that property. Also, you know, I know that I'm getting into the weeds here, but, you know, they need to share some responsibility of the transfer of ownership to this building, because the town is going to assume all responsibility. If there is some kind of a hazardous waste or something there on the property, you know, the deed, the survey, and all this other stuff should be equally shared before we assume complete responsibility for this piece of property.
I'd love to ask that the old mill house, that we would entertain going into executive session. Because premature disclosure could put the town at disadvantage.
So,
Are we ready to go
The
into
first
that?
one made this year.
I would request that.
Ah.
But before we do that, is there any more discussion on any of the other buildings, other than some of the things we've already identified, like that?
okay, well, yeah, sure. Cold storage building, I don't understand the 50%.
That's the heated cold storage building,
Oh, that's.
where we're not, they're not,
Oh,
racks upstairs.
oh, sorry, okay, I was in the wrong place.
this doesn't address the, what they call
The
it.
really cold storage.
Yes, the truly cold
The
storage.
leaning tower.
Yeah, that needs to
Yeah.
be addressed.
It's actually really.
It is
scary.
not, yeah, it's nowhere near.
Is it
Okay,
the village
well.
meeting minutes that talked about that building?
Uh,
The structure, I guess I should call
Yeah, they said it was only like an internal wall or something.
it. Right. Both.
Well. I don't know.
Whatever, fix it, good, go in,
If they wanna fix it, fix it. This is a good start, but ownership needs to be transferred. And
That's
some,
what we're doing.
and some,
Ownership of.
I think all of these buildings, because even, regardless of, you know, the town garage and the village garage, this is way too easy to cancel and get out of, and really doesn't provide an actual benefit long-term for the town taxpayers and the village taxpayers.
Yeah.
Transfer of ownership would affirm transformation of liability. Their credits and everything.
Yeah.
And I believe some people around town told me that the Tetro property specifically, originally when the town bought that, the town and village, that they were each supposed to pick their piece, and then the remainder of that property is supposed to be sold back onto the tax base.
Yep.
So there's 200 and something acres out there that we do nothing and have no intention.
Trying to-
So,
When we purchased the property, the agreement the voters held us to was purchase it, yes, you purchase it, carve out what you need, and the remainder has to be sold. So we went back to the voter, however many years later, with a proposal to sell the rest of the property, the voters voted it down.
Town, I guess doesn't matter.
I don't remember, but it
was a town.
But do you actually, so there was a plan on what to carve out?
Yep.
What was needed, and that was separating the village and the town.
No, we were gonna carve out basically where all of the buildings are currently, where the sand pile is, that whole area is gonna stay jointly owned. And then all of the woods that go all the way up on French Hill was gonna be, our proposal was to be sold, but the voters voted down.
This agreement also doesn't talk about everything down there. Because the other building isn't mentioned here.
Oh,
The cold pool, the double cold storage.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't mention anything about the generator, which was of specific concern. I remember. Back at the other meeting. And the fuel pumps that I keep coming back to, they're broken. But I guess we'll be able to build on a different one.
Good start, but yeah.
It's a great start,
I
but
agree with all
I'm not
you're saying.
saying that it's a bad document.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Totally agree with you.
and the village proposed this.
Yes.
Just trying to get that sometime.
I think all.
Are we gonna go to executive session?
Brian, you got the language?
I do.
All look like humans, not.
This will be the 20th year, you'll be all gray hairs.
You know where it will be.
Yeah. In the grave. This is, oh, great.
I move that premature disclosure of the details of the town's position on the future disposition of the old mill house will be damaging to the town's ability to negotiate. All in one swoop?
That's the first
Two
one.
motions.
It's 2 motions.
That's the first one,
Second.
motion and second, any discussion? None, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Therefore, I move to enter into executive session to discuss the responsibilities of shared municipal buildings as allowed by 1 VSA 313A1.
Sorry.
A motion and second, any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Wilson, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Executive session, 9:42.
We probably should have done that instead of running it out.